And we're back.
All right. We are back. What is up, everybody? I hope you guys had a wonderful break and appreciate some of our new content that we've got going out here. We have a special treat for you guys. For tonight, our deep dive, we're going to take a look back at the year that was. That is 2020 in hindsight. Well, folks, we made it 2021. In previous years, that wouldn't be much of a milestone, but in 2020 is a year like any other. It's hard to articulate into words what 2020 means for the future of our society. And it was literally the year the earth stood still in so many more senses of the implication. Stark political divisions, a civil rights movement, a global pandemic that shaped how we live and interact, but also how we socialize. House parties have been replaced with Zoom calls. Live events have been replaced with live streamed events, and content creation is now bigger than ever. Let's start off with the world of video games. The world of video game industry is expected to bring in more revenue than sports and movies industry combined in 2020. With everything stuck inside, the video game industry boomed. The global video game industry revenue is up 20% as expected to make 180 billion for 2020. In 2019, the movie industry brought in 100 billion, and Major League Sports brought in 75 billion, but it's expected that those figures in 2020 will be significantly lower due to the pandemic. Nintendo recently reported that its sales of the Switch and Switch Lite have climbed to 80% between April and September, and it said that it expects to move to about 24 million units in its physical year ending in March. So up from previous projections of 19 million. Animal Crossing, released as lockdowns began in the United States, already sold more than 26 million units and is on its way to be replaced as the best-selling Nintendo Switch game ever. It's not just Nintendo that has capitalized from the heightened demand. Sony and Microsoft both released next-generation consoles in November. The demand for the PlayStation and Xbox, PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X has been overwhelming, to say the least, to the point where retailers like Walmart and Amazon haven't been able to keep it in stock. Do you think the industry will be able to maintain the pandemic momentum, or is this boom something you see solely existing in the pandemic? Brahman.
How am I muted? I don't think it solely exists. Maybe having numbers this dramatically higher, which is kind of shocking to me when you're going through that. But I think that anytime a new console is dropped, there is that whole like, oh, we can't like get them off the shelves quick enough, and everyone's like pre-ordering this, and especially a lot during the holidays and kind of like that Black Friday into Christmas thing. Like whenever the consoles come out, they they don't have trouble selling. So I think that the video game industry is going to continue to boom. It's going to keep on booming, pandemic or no pandemic. People want to play games. They're going to keep coming out with cool new things, and people are going to want to play them.
I think it's going to be able to maintain the level of momentum that it's had over specifically over the pandemic and surging over even TV and sports as well.
No, I don't think that it will keep this post-pandemic. When you're drawing comparisons like that, I do think that the other industries are going to pull ahead like they were. This is really a unique kind of situation for that, but I still have a little faith.
I don't know.
What about you, Jake? Do you think it's do you think it's going to be able to replace the medium that movies and sports have been?
I don't know about replace, but I personally, and I know a lot of people who probably feel the same way, I think COVID really just expedited things that were already going to happen. I think a lot of people, some have said that we didn't truly live in a digital age until COVID-19. Like we felt like we were living in a digital age, but we did so much in person and like, person to person kind of things that like we weren't truly in our digital age until 2020. And I think like it's just now starting. And I think video games are going to continue to grow. I think movie theaters are in a lot of trouble, so the movie industry's got to figure something out. A lot of people stream movies via their video game consoles. And so if HBO Max is the future of movie going, someone's going to be watching that on an Xbox most of the time. And so it's just and so, like, yeah, no, and so it's just one of those where, like, I think the digital age is here, and I don't think it's going anywhere, right? Like, I think if anything, we're gonna be living more online, and I think more people have come to gaming because of the pandemic and realize they like it. They like it as an escape. I know a lot of people whose first console, since they were probably children, or if they've ever even owned a console, was the Nintendo Switch. There's a reason why throughout the pandemic, no one's been able to get their hands on them. They've been selling out as soon as they hit the shelves. And so,
At the same pace as,
yeah.
PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X being able to continually keep their console off the shelves because they've just been selling like hotcakes.
Yeah. People
And
want them. The demand is higher than it's ever been, and I
right,
really don't see it going anywhere, even with the pandemic. I think COVID just pushed it to where, it's gonna be, right? And now it's here. And so, like, I think video games are gonna keep booming. And a lot of actors, like Jason Gordon-Levitt, I think, or was one, and like a lot have come forward over the pandemic that have gotten into video gaming or gotten into gaming and said, like, this is the future of storytelling, which is something that I believe a lot of people have been saying for a long time, but no one really wanted to get out there and really go for it. But, I mean, this, you've played games like story driven games that you felt like were better than movies. Red Dead was one of the best
right.
movies I ever played, and, like 2 years ago or whenever it came out. And so, like, I do believe that, narrative driven stories are here to stay in video gaming. And I think video games are just going to continue to soar in popularity. Esports is about to explode too. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's been blowing up, and it's been ever increasing over the pandemic. I mean, the video game industry, of all the industries out there, it's been the one that's been booming the most. And one of the things that we've also seen with this is the rise of the indie gamer as well. So Among Us is a great example in the rise of the indie gamer, but Innersloth's growth was so large that due to Among Us' sudden popularity, had to cancel plans for a sequel and won awards in 2020 despite its age. Um, Fall Guys and Hades are other great examples of games that also took away awards. I mean, people didn't even know what Hades was, but it was getting awards at the Game Awards ceremony. That all of a sudden, it's got grown a ton of popularity. Why were indie gamers so successful in 2020?
I mean, I believe it's because of the price point for a lot of them, the accessibility. That's a big thing. A lot of indie games are much cheaper than the $60 price tag and future and soon to be $70 price tag for many AAA titles, right? A
Mhm.
lot of your big developers, these games are they're kind of expensive. And so people who were maybe first time playing games were playing, like, essentially like, looking at Steam for cheap games they could play with friends, stumbled upon something like Among Us. Among Us went from 18 players to millions within a week. And so it's one of those where, like, it just goes to show that the pandemic really kind of made multiplayer games a focus. And so I think there was a lot of like fun little one-off multiplayer games, battle royale style games like Fall Guys that like indie developers were already, either currently developing just to get out there and test the waters, that exploded due to the pandemic and just how many more people were gaming during the time. And, like I said at the beginning, the price point. I mean, you got something as fun as Among Us, and I believe at most it's like $2 on something like, like, or whatever it is in the App Store. And so, yeah, like, it's super cheap whenever, and you compare that and look at Hollow Knight. That's another great indie game. And like you said, Hades, some of those, like, those are all like coming under the $60 price point. A lot of them are on Switch, which is also the console that's been selling out like crazy. And I think that was two of the big winners, during this whole pandemic in general. Or I'll say there was three: PCs, because I think a lot of people when they were at home, even, on the cheaper end, had time to build PCs, dabble with PCs, get into PC gaming. Nintendo crushed it during the pandemic. And then indie gamers. I mean, Stardew Valley, even though it didn't come out this past year,
Yeah.
is something, Concerned Ape, shouts out. I've loved Stardew Valley from day one, and they're an amazing indie developer, and they make a game that was a quarter of the price, and definitely like 2 times the value of some AAA games.
Yeah. Brahman, why do you think indie gamers were so successful in 2020?
So I think one reason, and this might be a stretch, but there's been a huge rise of streamers as well as a lot more people playing game. Like there are a lot more people streaming games, and when you're playing those even streaming those bigger games, there's a lot more maybe competition for airtime. So you might try to pull from these smaller games, these indie games, to be showing something different, and that kind of builds and the fire burns, and people just start to really like be interested, their interest is struck and they like want to play it themselves. I feel like a lot of that might have been the fire that fueled Among Us, just having that big streaming community of that. I know that's how I heard of that game, was watching people stream it and wanting to get in on the fun. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. That's absolutely a great point. Well, we mentioned Animal Crossing a little bit earlier and how it played a very unique role in the pandemic. People attended even graduations and funerals in the game as a stand-in for in-person events during the pandemic. Games like Among Us have been great for socializing as well, and have been filling a big void in the pandemic. What are some ways that you've been using video games to connect with others during the pandemic? Brahman?
So I think one of my one of my last events that I actually went to in person, like my live event before the pandemic hit, was a League of Legends championship match. And then since everything shut down after that, I've actually played that to like stay connected with some friends, and was able to have a nice old Bama reunion with some people over League of Legends. It was really fun. So getting together on Discord, which I started using a lot more. I wasn't using Discord at all before the pandemic, and then my Dungeons and Dragons group started meeting on there, and that spiraled into a whole bunch of other things. So that's been great. Also, you mentioned Animal Crossing, and I have been, especially during the beginning, going on friends' islands and seeing people that way. And that was a really fun way to stay connected. Not really any events, but more just, oh, it's like a space to be able to hang out with somebody and to connect with your friends. And I think that was really cool. Um, even, yeah, my right when it was in April. Yeah, in April, my brother and I, we both have birthdays in April. So we got matching Switches, the Animal Crossing Switches, and it was like the perfect time to get it because I think it was right after we got our Switches. You couldn't find them anymore. And I'm like really like my parents did a good job. Like great birthday present. You didn't even know how good that was.
Came
You
in.
didn't even know how good you did.
Yeah.
What about you, Jake? Unique ways that you were able to connect with people through video games during the pandemic?
Well, I mean, we obviously played a lot of Among Us with some people, fans and stuff here of the show. The Nerd Herd shouts out. I know we've got a few Among Us games under us, but then also, like, I mean, I played Among Us with Kev, Fattest Sax, all those guys before we even did it on stream. And that was super fun. It was always fun trying to get different friends together. We were able to, it was fun to play like Kevin's been a Virginia friend of mine for a while. We've been working together for a long time, and he's known Fattest Sax for like his whole life too. And then they were all playing with best friends of mine from like Alabama, one from like North Carolina. And like, so it was fun to have like all these different friend groups together playing a game together, and so and it was a unique experience that honestly, without COVID, I don't know if we would have got the whole gang like that, or if we would have continually gotten so many people to play together.
Shout out to Fattest Sax as well, but like I mean, like he's somebody that as a perfect example of somebody who I met and have become friends with, never met in person, but we've bonded over games of Among Us.
Yeah.
And like there's been a lot of times where I've been playing Among Us with a bunch of friends, and then we'll just stay on afterwards and we're chatting, and then like we have a video chat and we're just sitting there and we're actually socializing. And it's the closest thing that I can feel like right now in a pandemic to being at a bar with a group of friends. And to
Yeah,
me, that's
for real.
that's a really sacred feeling to me. It's something that I feel like it's something I really took for granted beforehand. But that I like fellowship with my friends. I like being able to go out, especially at if it's at a bar or whatever. Just before the pandemic, usually the most of the time I met it was at bars, but it doesn't have to be there. It just has to be someplace where you can all get together and just talk and just chill and just shoot the fucking shit. And like time can pass and nobody can say anything, and it doesn't fucking matter. You don't have to fill that void. It's not content that you're trying to create or consume or whatever the case may be. It's just you being there in the moment and shit like that. You know, there's a void for that in the pandemic.
Oh
And
yeah.
so playing games like Among Us seems like a little thing, but it gives so much more back. Like again, I, I've never met Kevin before in person. I've never met Fattest Sacks before in person. I've never met some of their friends that they've introduced me to before in person, but I've introduced them to people that I've met here in Austin that are now a part of a bigger community. To me, that is a really cool, unique thing
Oh yeah.
that this pandemic has brought has been that we've had to find different ways to socialize, and in doing so, found new friends literally in different time zones.
Yeah.
So that's that's pretty cool to me. But we didn't just use games to socialize. We also saw a huge increase in online streaming, as Brahman, you were mentioning earlier. Twitch boomed. I mean, it gained a ton of national attention, from DMCA takedowns to politicians using the platform to get out the vote. Twitch made headlines nearly every week in 2020. I made jokes about it earlier, but 2021 is yet to be an exception. It seems like society has really begun to understand Twitch's potential and are quickly working to monetize it. Would you agree, Jake?
Oh yeah, no, 100%. I definitely think a lot of people are starting to realize, just what is Twitch, right?
Yeah.
Like people used to look at me weird because I would do streams where we would literally would just scroll Reddit and talk shit about it. And like talk about like, what is this crazy ass video that we're watching or whatever? Like, what is this? What is that? And like, just hanging out with people and like letting them kind of like scroll content with me, play a game with me, kind of like, get to know who I am and stuff like that. And people would always, like whenever I told people what I streamed, they'd always be like, "Oh, so it's you don't just play a bunch of video games?" And I'm like, "Nah, like that's not what all Twitch is, right?" And like even Jessica, whenever she started her stream, she did her makeup and she got a lot of views of just doing her makeup, and like it was because people would come in, ask questions about like what are you using, what products, all this different stuff. And like I think this year has really started to make people realize that Twitch's potential is that it's not just video games. It's a lot more. It's it's a whole community. You can build whole communities.
You recognize that Twitch has more potential than just video games.
Exactly,
Clearly, this
right? Yeah,
graph
like
on this show, brought to you live on Twitch,
yeah.
realizes that Twitch has more potential than just video games.
Than
But
just playing
continue.
video games, yeah. And so, like, I think a lot of others really realize that too, and I think that Twitch is going to continue to grow. I really do. It's honestly a shame that it doesn't have, things like Mixer any longer to be real competition with it, and that the only people around now are big dogs like fucking YouTube and Facebook gaming and blah, blah, blah. And
Yeah.
so, like, because I'm going to be on Twitch and I like it, but Twitch does have its problems. And without a key competitor, it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. But then who knows? There may be, a competitor could arise just because of the popularity of Twitch alone. But being backed by Amazon makes that super hard. We're going to just have to continue to see. But I would definitely agree that this was the year of the streamer.
For sure, for sure. And we did see them capitalizing on it. We saw the new pay to play, pay to affiliate status that they rolled out. Are you
Yeah.
worried that we're going to see more monetization like this happen in the future, Brahman?
I'm worried about that. I think that everything, especially everything that starts at that free or just like low entry point, like eventually builds into something more. Like even today, I was listening to like SoundCloud on my phone, and I'm just like ads started playing, and I was like, oh God, like I remember the days when this used to be free. And maybe that's what people will say about Twitch one day. Is like I remember when it used to be free to stream, and it would be sad to see it take that turn, because I do love this platform existing that is so free and open and accessible to everybody, so that you have so many different viewpoints and you have so many different people using it. And I would hate for them to create sort of walls in which and seeing that kind of pay to play thing like that, that's the start of that. And that's sad to me. It's not only that, which is good, but it is a little bit concerning.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, while 2020 was a great year for content creators, content consumers had a harder time. Movie theaters had it the hardest, and in the entertainment industry, as gathered and poorly ventilated movie theaters became more and more dangerous. Few tried to release movies, but the box office numbers were grim to say the least. Uh, this put a ton of projects on indefinite hold, and new content became surprisingly scarce. Um, And this led to the legendary decision by HBO Max to release a majority of its 2021 lineup on HBO Max for a limited time, as well as in theaters. With the consequences of this decision impacting the movie lineup far beyond the perceived end of the pandemic, do we still feel like HBO made the right call here, Brahman? I know we've talked about this so much, but again,
I I think it was a responsible oh, wow, look at me. Look at me now.
all
Thought
right.
I think Hi, I'm back. I think the respons I think I made the responsible call, by not encouraging people to go to movie theaters, and, uh, it's interesting that you point that out too, the, like, poorly ventilated thing when you poorly ventilated theaters where you're sitting all together, and then in my head, I just thought of, like, an airplane and then, like, rigging movie theaters to be like airplanes, and so, like, "Oh, that's an idea. That might be what movie theaters do next." Maybe they're all just or like those, where you go to those cannabis smoking lounges where they have those huge vents that, like, suck it all out. Oh, wait, you guys don't live in LA.
I don't live in LA. No.
Um,
Mm,
but
still
yeah,
illegal here in Virginia.
uh,
Wah,
I got
wah.
sidetracked, but I think, yeah, I think they made the right call. What do you think, Jake?
Yeah, no, I mean, like, definitely, I enjoy watching movies directly on my couch, so I'm always going to support them coming straight to me rather than me having to go to them. But I don't want theaters to die. That's my only caveat. Like, I enjoy streaming some movies at home, right? And I like the ability. I like this new idea of maybe there could be a dual world where we're doing both, where movies are premiering in theaters and at the house at the same time, kind of a thing. And so I really do like that, and I hope that continues to roll out. I think HBO Max had to do what it needed to do, which is essentially say like, "Hey, we're dropping all of this content on here, so come subscribe, baby." Like they had to pump up those subscriber numbers because HBO needed the cash money, and so like I think it was a smooth business move. Now, is it something that AMC supports? No, no, of course not. And that's why, like Nolan, AMC, like all these people are coming out and they're like, saying they don't really support the move, and that's because and we talked about this before. The current system isn't set up to like benefit them from streaming, right? So if they change the system and it benefits everybody from streaming, similar to how like I'm assuming music's done over the years, then I think it was a great move. I think HBO just going ahead and ripped the band-aid off where others are still trying to keep it on.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. I think there's a lot of there are pros and cons to it. I mean, I think that there is ways to look at it as a consumer, that there are could be just pros, but when you look at the grand scheme of things, and especially taking in perspective from people who actually work in the industry, you get a better picture of it. So um overall, I think it's the right call for the time. We'll see how that looks going forward, and we'll see the consequences of it going forward. But for right now, if I have to predict the weather, you know, I think it's the right call. Um, but I feel like everybody adjusted to the lack of content differently. Some revisited old series, some ventured into new ones. Some people finally got caught up on series that they always planned to get to, and some just indulged in whatever Netflix had to give them. Because
Mhm.
of this series, like Avatar: The Last Airbender and its sequel series Legend of Korra got a new life. We also saw series like Tiger King get this, completely kind of buzzworthy, sensationalized, fan base. How did you adjust to the lack of content, Jake?
I mean, honestly, I don't feel like there was a lack of content. That's the biggest thing. Like, it seemed like there was always something to watch, something to play. There was a lot of games this year that were pretty good. And I know we're going to go into that, definitely in our top Zen, but like, there was a lot of good games and a lot of good shows and a few good movies. Not many good movies. I'm going to, like, I'll pump the brake on that one. There was some okay movies, but like overall, 2020 was a pretty solid year for video games. There
Yeah,
was some pretty great games. And as a gamer, that was just, that's the main kind of content that I take in overall anyway.
yeah,
And then shows. There was a lot of really good shows. It's weird. Two of my favorite things, and I mean, dude, I know like it's the 30-year-old man child, but animation and video games really crushed it during the pandemic, and that was two. That's two of my favorite things. I love animated shows and I love fucking video games, and so it's like neither one of those really hit a lack. As a matter of fact, I believe they hit their stride during the pandemic. People can voice act from home. Animation is something that a lot of people can do from home, and so there was a lot of animated series that just kind of kept chugging along, right? And a lot of new ones that came out too. And also, like you said, I'm just like everybody else. That I definitely had a backlog of TV and movies that I had to go back and watch that I had not got a chance to see yet. And so, I really, how did I adjust to the lack of the lack of content? I didn't have to. I didn't feel like there was really that much of a lack of content. Really,
For
pretty
me,
heavy year.
I did go back and start a checklist of different stuff that I wanted to go back and see, and then some stuff I went like a couple of ways through, and I go, oh, I don't like this, and I changed to something different, and like, finally was able to give you enough of a review and indulge enough of that content to decide I don't like it, which I think is a powerful thing. I think other series, like I never got to see Legend of Korra. I never got to see the end of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I love that series now. I think it is probably one of the greatest animated series of all time out there. I think that the storyline is great. You talk about some of the best character development in all of animation. I think there's not a character in either of those series that you can't say has, substantial character development, even some of the minor characters. And so I got to indulge in that content because I had a lot more time on my hands. So that's for me how I did. I went back through my checklist. What about you, Brahman?
List. I do not think that there may have been a lack of content, but for me, there was definitely not a lack of free time because I've been a lot busier during this than I was before. So yeah, I'm happy. I did let Netflix feed me a bit. Like a lot of the Netflix originals or new things that flash up because they're there and they're being advertised. I've been watching a lot of those things. And I do, like I said, I have Mandalorian on my checklist now, and I think that's gonna be the next thing that I try to dive into. But a deep well it is to dive. So I was
Highly
going to
suggested.
get caught up.
Highly suggested.
It's
Still a great
it's
show.
absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. Um, the HBO Max decision did kind of explode into an already volatile situation. Watching the entertainment industry attempt to create amidst this pandemic has been a spectacle nonetheless. From COVID test expenses to distressing over the most recent positive test result from certain celebrities to listening to Tom Cruise's latest rant, filmmakers are frustrated. Is the outrage justified, Brahman?
I think I'm kind of on the fence. I think it's partially justified because there are a lot of people within the industry who are working really hard and who are taking a ton of precautions and kind of like not feeling like your work is being like given the stage that you're expecting it to. But I think that everyone just needs to adjust their expectations and just reframe what they view as their platform. Like adjusting to the world of streaming or creating new uh, innovative ways to watch things. Like I was just hearing about a film festival that's being done in a drive-in, and I'm like, that is so cool. Like that is a way to keep this going, but in a safe manner, and to adjust instead of just sitting around complaining about how, oh, it's not how it used to be. Well, of course it's not. The whole world isn't, and we all
100%.
have to like work together. Mhm.
Is the outrage justified?
I mean, like, I definitely think that some of the outrage is justified whenever you're kind of Bronwyn was even saying, some people are working really hard and other people may not be taking it as serious. And so, guys, I mean, Tom Cruise's whole rant, I know there was some PR stuff behind it where people said, it was whatever. But like at the end of the day, it's not like the dude was wrong. He was pretty much just saying, like, hey, this is people's livelihoods. And if you two don't stand 6 feet apart, these people don't get fucking paid today. And so it's just one of those things where, like, dude, stand 6 feet apart so we can all get paid so they can feed their families. That's pretty much what Tom Cruise was saying. And I don't think that's too crazy, and so, but overall, like, I think Bronwyn really nailed it with saying that the people got to adjust. There used to be a time when people thought the television, someone doing television was like, oh no, they made the move down, to television, right? Like there used to be this whole like, yeah, you moved up to movies and you moved down to TV, right? That's not the case. Like I really think like, a lot of shows like Breaking Bad and even, some of the stuff before then really kind of like changed the game and started to show TV as this whole different medium that could tell a story the way a movie could never. And so I think people really need to realize that with streaming, binging, especially shows and stuff like that, it's still relatively new. And so I think some directors like your Nolans and stuff like that that are totally like against people watching stuff in their homes, they need to realize I got a 70-inch in here. We got surround sound. We got like I'm seeing your movie in a pretty it's OLED baby. Like I'm watching your shit like pretty clear. And so like you got to understand that people have upped their games with their home entertainment as well, and that streaming isn't necessarily like the worst way to watch a film anymore.
Right, but I think Nolan's concern is more the metric that he loses with that is the fact that he doesn't get box office numbers with that.
Yeah, no, and I get that part of it.
He doesn't get those results with that, and then
Less than that.
There's still ways to measure it, and I think that like,
Yeah.
oh, got this many views. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, we're still able to compare the success of Soul versus Wonder Woman and how those movies were received. So I think that those factors exist out there. But to go to your decision, I mean, that's not the only real thing that we looked at when it looked at TV was just the delivery of the medium, but the media itself, and COVID not being the only influencing factor in that media. I mean, the Black Lives Matter protests in the summer brought a lot of issues. But one of those issues happened to be our media. Very rarely, I can't really think of ever, and there's a case where a show has been canceled because of what the show is about and what the show uplifts. Like I can't think of any other time when it was just like this show gets dropped right here because of what they represent and who they are uplifting. And I, for one, 100% agree and support the cancellation of cops and propaganda shows like them. But to me, like how significant is it that they canceled series like Cops for the reasons that they did, Jake?
Yeah, I think like Cops and like Campus PD and those kind of shows or whatever, like, they were, yeah, Live PD, they were all used in clearly like, it's been kind of basically proven they were propaganda, right? Like where basically like cities, just to be clear, cities who would have like negative PR because say some police shot an innocent person, right, which happens a lot. They would basically like bring in live PD or cops to do an episode. They would tag along with some hokey guy that, like somebody that's like, an all shucks style cop, right? One of the good ones, if you will. And then, they would see him like do some normal traffic shit or maybe hunt down somebody who clearly needed to be arrested, right? Like, and so like they would use it to kind of like make that force look better. I think like, there was a good time for us to like examine our media and say like, shit like that's got to go. Right. And so I'm glad we got them out. Now, the double edge of that is that like, buddy cop's still a good trope in my opinion. I liked Brooklyn Nine-Nine and I'm going to really miss Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Right. And so like it's one of those where like it definitely sucks that it's all like going that way, but then like I don't know, man, like I would honestly, before we cancel cops, could we just like maybe pass harder laws against police brutality? Like I think a lot of shit got done that didn't really need to get done, you know what I mean? But that's like a whole nother topic for another day.
That's the topics that the politicians have to cover. For us on Geek Life, though, I think that seeing a series getting canceled just simply because of what they're uplifting shows a new way that we look at
Yeah.
media, a new way that we look at cancel culture. Because this is one that, I mean, say what you want about cancel culture, but I'm fucking pro cancel culture here. And I think that this decision of doing that not only resonated with me as like hey, what are these shows uplifting, but like shows like Gotham. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Gotham is a buddy cop show based in the Batman universe, and I happen to like it a lot because it do a lot with the Batman universe stuff. But I also did root for Jim Gordon, and I also started to look at, well, what is Jim Gordon as a character? I wouldn't have had that thought process had it not been for the events that happened in 2020. had it not been for the Black Lives Matter protests, had it not been for cops being canceled because of it. So while it may be an insignificant thing, it did cause a significant enough reaction for me to reevaluate where my influences go. And I think that that says something.
No, I mean every change is important, definitely.
Yeah.
I just definitely like like Kevin said, or Todd Lee also said, we need police reform and for the cops to stop killing us. Okay, we got it. We'll cancel cops. Or we'll change. We're taking Uncle Ben off of this rice. You know what I mean? And it's just like, come on, like okay,
Answer my out of there. Like,
like okay, cool, but can we do something about the actual brutality, please? Like,
So yeah, and I think that canceling and like letting sort of the opinion of we don't like what this is saying, we are going to cancel it. Like in this instant, yeah, it's a good thing. I don't like what they're saying, but I do get scared when that sort of control, or like it's not really censorship, I guess, in this instance, but just like having such control over media in that way. Like it treads like a dangerous line of, oh, we don't like what you have to say, you're gone. Oh, we don't like your opinion, you're not, this show's not anymore. But yeah,
I can see that because then like where's like like people with animal like animal rights activists or something like that. What happens like do we eventually lose all the Nat Geo shows about hunting, right? Like like I don't think that's necessarily as far as it'll go, but I get what you're saying on the fact that like it could eventually be to where like mobs control what we get to see on television. I don't think that's necessarily what happened here.
Yeah.
I think cops had already been on a rocky road where a lot of people had said like, hey, this is kind of like, propaganda in a way. But like, I definitely could see where, everything kind of, but the bar always changes, right? Like, everything's always changing. And so it's just one of those where like, it's interesting that I did not see us losing cops in 2020. I will say that was a surprise.
Yeah. To me, to give that power back to the people is a good thing. I think that is where that should lie in those instances when it crosses a line like what cops crossed, where it's promoting something that is actively harming a community, and promoting something that, I mean, in all personality, like in all personally, like that shit disturbs me, seeing the cops put it on a pedestal at this point in time, after all that we've seen, after all the events of 2020. And so I think this is a good example of the public getting to that point all at once and that bubbling over to a point where it seemed very, very clear, versus kind of a mob mentality kind of thing, where something is going out of hand. So I think that right now, as it stands, that power being there is a good thing. Now, with that said, it is also hard to go back and look at all the positives. They canceled cops in 2020 when literally, like we saw a shitstorm at the fucking Capitol where the cops were fucking letting people in through the gates and not doing shit while they had fucking tear gassed them weeks before so that the fucking president could hold up a Bible. Like there's obviously a lot of work to be done on this issue, not to not to understand. That is absolutely understating it, but
divisive question though, what about Captain Marvel being military propaganda and how much US military propaganda is in films and movies in general? Like the only reason they let Captain Marvel, that movie, and them like use the jets and use like military stuff, and the only reason, if you see a tank in a movie, it's because the US military approved the use of that tank usually, and then also got to see the script and fit in some cool lines about how dope it is to be in the fucking army. And I'm not against it, but I'm just saying like it's kind of like on the same line in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you could extend it out to War Machine. You could extend that out to even Green Lantern being a military officer as well. You could extend that to Captain America, and
Cap.
and I think that those conversations, to be honest, Jake, how do you answer that? I think those conversations should be welcomed. I think those conversations should be had.
Oh yeah.
And we should actually examine whether or not. And I've fucking love Captain America. I wrote a 25-page paper about Captain America when I was in high school about how he is a thermometer of American culture and not just some nationalistic icon. And I could go through all the reasons of that, and I could talk to you about all those things. But if I'm going to go back and look at it as you know, well, I mean, I guess it's just straight propaganda, military propaganda at this point, and examine whether or not that's healthy with it as relationship with other people throughout the world. I think those are healthy conversations to have, and those should be had. And if I come up the other end of it and I fucking hate Captain America, then I'm gonna have some stuff I have to fucking deal with that.
Yeah.
I think that it's a
Reflection.
thing. I think that you should the characters that you adore and uplift and praise should go through that meat grinder. Should go through the why am I uplifting these people? You shouldn't just blindly like somebody because they blow things up and that looks cool. Like I think that there should be more to it. But that's me. I'm a sentimental person. That's how I think about it.
I think that's what you just described is the exact opposite that's happened to the Punisher as a character. People on the extremes of, certain sides really love the fucking Punisher, but they don't understand what the Punisher even really stood for, right? Or what he really did, in the comics anyway. And so it's just really it's really interesting basically where we've gotten in our overall just I definitely see the fall of cops being basically what I got with that, Captain Marvel question is I kind of see cops almost being the launch pad of this overarching conversation, which is that are we tired of just bullshit propaganda being in our movies and television? Why can't we just have something for entertainment? Why has it got to be selling me something all the time?
I mean,
But then
when you look at the plot of Top Gun, it's just straight military propaganda, and you kind of know at the beginning, but you get to get in 2020 hindsight, it has a different flavor of in my opinion, you know. So I think that was
no, I was a little taken back whenever I was playing Cyberpunk and half of the missions you're just working for the Night City Police Department, busting crimes, and I was like, am I a cop? Is this game about being a cop right now?
Right. What about
you make a ton of money being a cop in Cyberpunk, which is so bizarre to me that anyway.
that is really, really bizarre. Brahman, what about you? Is there anything that 2020 hindsight has brought to light as far as previously dismissed problematic content? As how significant was the cops cancellation?
I never watched Cops, but I understand the statement it was making. So yeah, I do think it's pretty significant and putting our foot down and saying, we've had enough. We've had enough of this.
And the chat said that patriotism hit differently in 2020. And yes, indeed, it does. Whew, it hit different for sure.
When I used to see a man draped in the United States flag with his face painted as the flag, I just assumed we were at a football game,
right?
Not a riot.
You know what I mean? Patriots game, right?
Yeah, I kind of assume is usually at that or a Bama game. You'd be surprised.
I think it was a goddamn insurrection. Fuck. Ugh.
Did not know it was terrorist activity.
No, for real. All right. Well, moving on.